Hello and welcome to Europa Universalis 4. I am Lord Forwind, here with another country guide, this one recommended by people on the community page. This is a guide for the Palatinate. So they are actually one of my favorite nations in Europa in general. I just like them. They start off as one of the electors of the HRE, which is always a positive thing. They start off kind of divided with a territory over here on the border of Bohemia and Bavaria, and in the center of the HRE. So they start off with some of the better starting ideas. They get tax modifier and diplomatic relations, which is very handy because you're surrounded by enemies. You're going to need lots of allies. You also get a free diplomatic reputation pretty early on. The advisor cost is very handy. Unfortunately, the rebel support efficiency, not so great. Tech costs, solid, as is missionary strength, prestige decay, and stability costs, with the finisher of improved relations. So if you're to look at this, it's pretty obvious that they are a diplomatic-based country. They don't actually have any military ideas at all, which means playing as them is rather tricky. You have to rely a lot on allies. However, they are one of four nations in the HRE who can theoretically form the Holy Roman Empire and do it largely diplomatically. Others, of course, being Austria, Saxony, and sometimes, depending how you play it, Bohemia. The Palatinate is one of the stronger ones to do so. They do not have the ability to form Hanover, which is important to note, but they can form Westphalia. You have to control that land. You have to move your capital into the area. That you get claims in that whole area. It's kind of cool. It's a solid one. But they're definitely a diplomatic nation. Usually, you can find alliances with one or more of the electors in your area. You almost always can get an alliance with Austria straight off the bat, so that is worth doing. Trier usually likes you. If Trier doesn't like you, Maine likes you, and usually the other vice versa hates you. Sometimes Cologne will like you. If you can, that's really good. I will point out one quick thing as the Palatinate, that you do not wish to become Emperor of the HRE too early. You're really tiny, so trying to unite the entire HRE proves to be difficult until you grow to at least the size of Bohemia. So I would advise against that. However, you can ally Bohemia, you can ally Austria usually early on, both of which are solid allies. In terms of expansion, this is a little bit tricky because you're surrounded by two electors here, one elector here, and then you've got a couple free cities interspersed in the area around you. In my experience, the best area to expand into is first take Ansbach. If you can get it, it's worth it. Be careful though, because it can fall under a Union of Brandenburg very easily. Then the best area overall to expand in the HRE in general is actually Bavaria. Usually they rival you, which is sad because you have, if I remember, the same dynasty as them. Yes, you have the same dynasty as both Denmark and Bavaria, which means if you can get lucky, you can potentially get an alliance with Denmark, maybe get some inheritance either of Bavaria or Denmark. However, you're weak compared to both of them. So Ansbach is a good expansion point. Baden down here is pretty good. They've got two provinces. Obviously, Alas and Württemberg are pretty good. Of course, remember you are in the HRE, so expansion has penalties. Ansbach, though, you can usually take out without much trouble. Obviously, get your allies, improve things. Hopefully, they don't tend to get really any good allies. Both Baden and them tend not to. Bavaria is a bit more risky. I wouldn't go after them, so you can call in either like Austria, Saxony, or Bohemia. I've never had much luck attacking Würzburg early on. They usually get one or two half-decent allies, but it's up to you. Do not go for Nuremberg. It is so tempting. It's a very high development province, but it is a free city. Unless it falls away from being a free city, it will be defended by the Emperor, and that's a whole mess you don't want to get into. Once you become Emperor, though, you can, of course, revoke it and then go after them. They're definitely the slowest of the diplomatic nations in the HRE to form the HRE in general. Austria obviously starts off ahead. Saxony starts off with half-decent development, more than you. And obviously Bohemia is huge. But Once you take over Ansbach, you have 2 routes of expansions into Bavaria. I wouldn't take them all out in one war, but if you can, I would try and cut them off from Bohemia and um, just in general. Bohemia tends to go after Bavaria and vice versa. You don't really have to worry too much about Ulm or Memming expanding. Salzburg, on the other hand, can be a bit of a spoiler because they tend to ally Austria, and Augsburg obviously does whatever they want. You can't, unfortunately, expand into Lorraine, even though that would look ideal because they're allied to their junior partner under Provence, who starts the game allied with France. However, Provence tends to get excommunicated by the Pope most of the game, which can sometimes lead to a breaking of alliance with France, which means take this land. It's good. That's 35 development or more. It's more development than you. Well, it's almost as much development as you start. Obviously, be careful of coalitions. So best way to get around that is, in my experience, currently in the game, is to take influence ideas. Now, if I remember in the new expansion pack that they've just announced a while ago, the aggressive expansion may shift into diplomatic ideas, in which case diplomatic ideas become that much more useful. So obviously check that out when you're playing, but for now, the aggressive expansion reduction is huge in the HRE. Plus the reputation and another relation slot. You are an elector, so if you do get enough prestige, you can in fact upgrade to a kingdom. You do have to get 300 development though, which is rather tricky. It's almost easier to form Westphalia and get the achievement there. It's kind of amusing that you can form a kingdom in the HRE with less than 300 development if you do it right. Obviously, that's a bit difficult to do. After taking influence ideas, which I recommend you take first or second, depends on what your play style is. Defensive ideas are going to be really strong. The bonus morale early game is amazing. You're not going to be able to support a larger army with quantity. Quality is too many naval ideas. You don't want that. Offensive, not that useful for you. Aristocratic, entirely useless. You don't have any real cavalry bonuses that would make it useful. The diplomat wouldn't be the worst though. Naval, obviously, I ignored that. In terms of admin ideas to take after you've probably taken influence, diplomatic, or defensive. Or sorry, influence, defensive, or diplomatic to replace influence. A good one is economic, surprisingly, because of the development. Your land is not particularly well developed, and you can get a hold of some grasslands pretty easily. So you can play relatively tall for that. Other options, if you're going to try and expand and conquer the HRE to form Germany, which is another option, admin ideas are really key for the reduced core creation cost. If you're worried about the Protestant Catholic issues, humanist will help you a bit, or religious if you want to stay Catholic. I've never found innovation that useful on them. Expansion, exploration, entirely useless. Trade, useless. Espionage can be semi-useful on these guys. It does have rebel support efficiency, which you have 20% of, giving you 70. Unfortunately, rebel support is rather weak, but if you're rich and powerful enough, you could get some crazy amount of rebel support. Constant rebellions. Maritime, useless. So my advice is you either take defensive if you're going to fight an early war against Baden or Ansbach and you're a little worried about it. Influence then to reduce the chance of coalitions, at which point then you can start expanding easier, upon which admin might become useful. So overall, a fun country to play. The tech cost is definitely their strongest idea, but the diplomatic relations slot early on is really powerful. It allows you to ally, 4 or even 5 of the electors at the beginning, which, plus you're an elector, you can easily become emperor. I just warn you, don't do it too early. If you do it too early, France, Poland, Hungary, they will, or Denmark, may attack the HRE. Burgundy almost definitely will if you're in charge. And although you can call in lots of allies, you can't get as good allies as Austria can. Sometimes if you're lucky though, you can pull off alliance with France. Obviously be aware that Austria and France are going to hate each other, so you get one or the other. That's the way it goes. The odds of you getting the Burgundian succession are extremely low unless Austria's ruler dies early. you become emperor, and at which point you pretty much just build as many troops as you can, trying to get a larger army than Spain or Bohemia to inherit that land. So that is a quick guide on how to play the Palatinate. Obviously, if you guys have any other questions or strategy, leave them below in the comments or let me know them. Essentially expand this direction, take over this area, try to take this land. Switzerland's a good target if you can get to it. That can lead you into Italy, which is not in the HRE after 1490, which gives you free reign for lots of development. Or the other alternative is you try and inch your way north towards Brunswick, form Westphalia there, and take over this region. Obviously, your biggest issue is growing large enough, fast enough, and actually taking military ideas. You're going to want to take more military ideas than most countries. Defensive, probably followed up by either quantity or offensive. Definitely want quality at some point. You're going to have to really heavily invest in your military to fight. Luckily, if you can ally Austria and Bohemia, or even Brandenburg, they'll do a lot of the fighting for you. You don't really have any trade centers, so I advise you to pick up one. A loss is right here. Sorry if I'm saying it wrong. It's pretty good. Or if Mainz hates you, taking out Mainz early on, grabbing a center of trade. You can make some half-decent money from the trade node of the Rhineland. It's really up to you. Nothing really amazing ways to earn money as this country. Your best bet is to just slowly expand, develop your land, and wait till you get imperialism, and then upon which you can conquer most of the HRE without too much trouble. So anyway, that's this guide. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you do, there's lots of other country guides on my channel. Please check them out. Please subscribe. Please click the weird bell icon for notifications, because that's a thing. And if you guys have any more recommendations for country guides or anything, feel free to vote and leave a comment on the community tab to encourage me to do those. Thank you guys all for watching. Bye for now.